Welcome, dear listeners of Golden Memories. Thank you for every like, comment, and warm word. They inspire us to create new heartfelt stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes, and enjoy listening.
After my husband's memorial service, my daughter drove me to a remote highway and declared, "This is your stop. The estate and company belong to me now." I stood in the dust, clutching my handbag as she sped away without a backward glance. No cell phone, no cash, and that's when I understood I wasn't abandoned. I was liberated, but she had no clue what I'd accomplished before her father passed. I'll reveal everything. I was born Victoria Ann Morris and became Victoria Blackwell when I married James in 1984 and remained that person until 7 weeks ago, the morning after we laid him to rest. I'm 69 years old with gentle hands that still remember how to embroider delicate patterns, like my daughter Catherine used to beg me to teach her every Sunday evening, and how to braid challah bread the way my son David insisted I show him when he was 9. I'm sharing this so you comprehend that before everything crumbled, I was simply a grandmother who believed she had raised decent children. James battled kidney disease for 14 months, the type that weakens you gradually, granting time for farewells, but never sufficient time to truly accept what's approaching. We kept it private initially, just between us. Our children were consumed with their busy lives, Catherine with her wellness spa business in Phoenix that constantly required emergency funding from Dad, and David with his real estate ventures in Las Vegas that never materialized but always demanded another loan from us. "They don't need this worry right now," James had whispered, lying in our bed, the pain medication making his voice soft. "Let them enjoy their lives without this darkness hanging over them." I agreed because I loved him deeply. But I should have known better. I should have remembered who our children truly were when they finally returned to our modest farmhouse in Riverside County, California. The same home where they'd been raised, where James and I had built Blackwell's organic farm, from a tiny vegetable patch into the most trusted organic produce supplier in 5 counties. They didn't come to comfort us. They came asking questions about money. "Mom, I'm just being smart here," Catherine said, using that fake sweet voice she'd learned from her spa management training. We were sitting in our breakfast nook, James resting upstairs after another difficult night. The medical bills must be enormous. "Have you and Dad thought about selling this old place? The farm is probably too much work for you both now." Catherine had escaped to Phoenix at 21, claiming rural California was too boring for someone with her ambitions. She'd only visited during holidays when she needed something, usually staying in luxury resorts because she was allergic to our chickens. But suddenly, while her father was dying, she became intensely interested in the organic farm that had embarrassed her throughout high school. David appeared 4 days later, driving a sports car he couldn't afford and wearing designer clothes that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. 8 failed business in 11 years. Each one started with his father's money. Each one abandoned when it required actual hard work. But he held James's hand the night before he passed and read him poetry from old books, which is why I still wonder how things went so wrong afterward. The funeral was simple, exactly how James wanted it. He was buried in the small cemetery behind the countryside chapel where winter flowers were just starting to bloom. I stood between my children as they lowered my husband into the earth, Catherine's arm around me, feeling cold and stiff, David crying real tears into a tissue I'd given him from my purse. "He's in a better place now," the pastor said softly, and I hope that was true and not just words people say to make death feel less scary. James and I weren't deeply religious people, but we'd attended services enough that Pastor Rodriguez knew to talk about James' love for growing organic food rather than heaven and angels. What I remember most about that day was how quiet everything felt afterward. The house seemed too big with all the neighbors dropping off meals and speaking in whispers about James's kindness, his generous spirit, how he'd helped the Chin family when their crops failed, or given free vegetables to the food bank for their community dinners. Nobody mentioned how he'd grown our business from nothing while raising 2 children who seemed to have forgotten everything he taught them about hard work and helping others. I prepared the guest rooms that evening. I told Catherine and David as the last visitors went home. I thought tomorrow we could look through some of your father's things together, maybe share some memories. Actually, Mom, Catherine said, setting down her wine glass in a way that reminded me of her father when he was thinking hard. David and I have been talking, and we think it's better if we take care of business quickly. We both have to get back to our lives. Take care of business. The property stuff, David explained, not looking at me directly. The organic farm. Catherine and I need to figure out what happens next. I'd expected sadness from my children, maybe some stories about their dad. Instead, I got a business meeting. Catherine opened her laptop on the kitchen table where we'd celebrated their birthdays, their school achievements, their college graduations. Dad talked to me about this last month, she said, still not meeting my eyes. He was worried about you running everything alone. The farm needs new equipment, fresh ideas. This house is too big for one person. You're 69 years old. I repeated the words, feeling bitter in my mouth. I've helped run this organic farm with your father for 40 years. And you've done amazingly well, David said, in the same voice he used when trying to convince investors to fund his failing companies. But now it's time to think about your future, Mom. A senior living place would give you friends, activities, people your own age. I have friends here. I have activities. My voice sounded strange even to me. This is my home. It's our family home, Catherine corrected gently. And Dad left the business to David and me in his will. He wanted us to take care of you, but he knew the farm needed younger people to run it. I stared at my daughter, this stranger in expensive wellness clothes who thought she knew anything about soil and seasons and the vegetables that had fed our family. Show me this, Will. She slid some papers across the table. Not from our longtime family lawyer's office, but something printed on Catherine's business letterhead. James's signature looked wrong somehow, too neat and perfect for a man whose hands had shaken from medicine for months. You made him sign this while he was sick and confused. The anger that filled me then was like a mother bear protecting her cubs. I'd felt it once before when I caught teenagers trying to steal produce from our fields late at night. He was thinking clearly. Catherine insisted firmly. He wanted us to have a new beginning with the business. There's a housing development company interested in buying our land. Housing development, David explained, his eyes lighting up with greed. They'll pay $5.8 million. Mom, we can all start fresh somewhere new. Fresh, as if the life James and I had built together was something old and spoiled. As if Blackwell's organic farm, our commitment to providing healthy food to families, our tradition of donating vegetables to every new family in town was worthless compared to a concrete subdivision for houses from the city. Your father would never sell this land to housing developers, I said, my voice stronger than I felt inside, and I never agreed to any of this. You don't have to agree, Catherine explained with fake patience. The business was in Dad's name only, the house too. California law says it all goes to us as his children. I understood then that they had planned this whole thing, not just after James got sick, but maybe even before. How long had my daughter been waiting for her father to die so she could turn our life's work into a housing development? How many times had David called pretending to check on James' health when he was really making sure their plan would work? I need time to think, I said, standing up slowly. I'm going to bed. We will talk about this tomorrow, but there would be no talking. While I lay awake in the bed I'd shared with James for 40 years, staring at the ceiling and listening to the old house settle around me, my children were making their final plans. Morning came with a smell of expensive coffee, the kind Catherine had brought from Phoenix because she said our regular coffee gave her headaches. I got dressed carefully, my joints stiff with sadness and age, and the cold knowledge of what my children had become. When I came downstairs, they were waiting with a small suitcase I'd never seen before. We packed some things you'll need, David said cheerfully. Catherine and I thought we'd drive you to look at Golden Years Manor today, It's a really nice place for older people just 90 minutes from here. I'm not going to look at any old people's home, I said, pouring myself coffee with hands that barely shook. This is where I belong. Mom, please be reasonable, Catherine sighed. The paperwork is already done. We're meeting with the development people next Thursday. You can't live here anymore. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw nothing of James in her face anymore. Nothing of the little girl who used to help me plant seedlings in the greenhouse, asking a million questions about how vegetables grow. Nothing but a stranger who saw me as something in her way. I need to get my medicine from upstairs, I said quietly, and I want to take a few pictures with me. Of course, Mom, David agreed, looking relieved. Take whatever personal stuff you want. We can mail the rest to you later. I walked through my home one more time, touching the wooden stair railing James had sanded and stained every spring, the family photos covering our hallway walls, the reading corner where I told bedtime stories to both my children when they were small. In the bathroom, I got my medicine, but I also took my passport and important papers from the secret drawer behind the mirror that James had built when we worried about break-ins years ago. In our bedroom closet, behind James's collection of work shirts that still smelled like him, I found the small metal box with the one thing my children didn't know existed. When I came back downstairs, my purse heavier, but my heart somehow feeling lighter, Catherine was checking the time on her phone. Ready? She asked. Not really a question. I nodded, letting David take my arm like I was already the weak old woman they wanted me to be. We got into Catherine's expensive car, all leather seats and fancy buttons that felt cold against my skin. I watched my home disappear through the back window, memorizing the sight of our greenhouse sparkling in the morning sun, the sign James had painted by hand that said, Blackwell's Organic Farm, growing health since 1984. We drove through Riverside County's rural roads, past the farmer's market where I still sold vegetables every Saturday, past the community center where I taught cooking classes every Tuesday. But instead of turning toward the highway where senior living places were built, Catherine turned onto Willow Creek Road, a country lane that wound through orange groves before reaching the interstate. 25 minutes later, she pulled over next to a field full of grazing sheep. The engine kept running as she turned to look at me. This is your stop, Mom, she said, her voice scarily calm. The house and business are mine now. What? David at least looked confused and worried. Catherine, what are you doing? What we agreed on? She snapped back at him. Mom will just cause problems. Try to stop the sale. Make us look bad to the development company. This is easier. She has her medicine, some clothes. There's a gas station about 5 miles up the road. She can call one of her farming friends from there. She reached across me to open my door. Get out, Mom. I looked at my daughter, searching for any trace of the child I'd raised, and found nothing but coldness. Then I turned to my son, whose mouth was opening and closing, but no words were coming out. David, I said softly, but I already knew he would do whatever Catherine told him to do. He always had. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. It's just, we really need this money. My real estate deals haven't worked out, and I owe people. I nodded once, picked up my purse and the little suitcase they'd packed, and stepped out onto the gravel road. The winter air was cool and smelled like new grass and sheep pastures. I stood there holding my bag as Catherine drove away fast, dust flying behind her car. David's worried face looked back at me through the rear window until they went over a hill and disappeared completely. No phone, no money, or so they thought. Just an old woman with what they didn't know I still owned. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I was free. Free from pretending these people deserved my love just because I'd given birth to them. Free from the heavy feeling of being disappointed by children who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to their greed. I started walking not toward the gas station Catherine had mentioned, but toward a future they couldn't imagine. In my purse was my passport, my medicine, and a deed. The original deed to 8 acres of prime land in my maiden name, bought before I married James, before Blackwell's Organic Farm grew bigger. the most valuable 8 acres, as it happened, which included the main greenhouse and the artesian well that any developer would need for their project. My children thought they'd left me with nothing. They were about to learn how completely wrong they were. The walk back to town took almost 5 hours. My comfortable shoes weren't made for country roads, but I didn't mind. By the time I reached Martinez's general store at the edge of Riverside County, my feet hurt, and the afternoon sun had made me thirsty, but my mind was crystal clear about what I had to do. I sat on the bench outside the store for a few minutes, watching normal people come and go with their groceries and everyday problems. People who had no idea that Victoria Blackwell, who organized their harvest festivals for 25 years, had just been thrown away like trash by her own children. Mrs. Blackwell, I looked up to see Jenny Martinez, the store owner's granddaughter, looking worried. "Are you okay? You look a little tired." "Just getting some fresh air, Jenny. It's been a difficult day." She nodded, glancing at my suitcase. "I heard about Mr. Blackwell. I'm real sorry. He was always so kind to everyone." "Yes, he was." I stood up slowly. "Jenny, could I use your phone? I seem to have left mine at home." "Of course you can." She led me inside, past shelves of local honey and homemade preserves, to the small office behind the counter. "Take all the time you need." I didn't call any of my farming friends, like Catherine had suggested. I called Maria Santos, our family lawyer for 28 years. "Victoria, I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. I was surprised not to see you at the will reading." My grip tightened on the phone. "What will reading?" Maria was quiet for a moment. "The will reading. Your children brought me a document, but I had serious questions about it. I've been trying to contact you since then. I've been dealing with some family issues," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Maria, I need your help, and I need you to keep this private. You have both. Can you meet me at my office in 90 minutes? I'll be there. I bought a cheap phone that you pay for ahead of time using cash I always kept hidden in a pocket of my purse for emergencies. James had always insisted we both carry emergency money after our car broke down on a trip years ago. I also bought a sandwich I was too angry to eat and a bottle of water. Jenny wouldn't let me pay for anything. On the house, Mrs. Blackwell. You've done so much for this community over the years. If you need anything else, you just ask." Her kindness almost made me cry. Almost. But I hadn't cried when they put James in the ground, and I wouldn't cry now. Maria's law office was in a beautiful old Spanish colonial building on Main Street that had been converted to offices. When her secretary saw me, her face filled with concern. "Mrs. Blackwell, Ms. Santos has been worried sick about you. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine, Patricia. Thank you for asking." Maria met me at her office door. Her kind face creased with worry. She'd been a friend of James's since law school, had handled all our legal work for decades, knew every detail of our business and our lives. "Victoria," she said, guiding me to the comfortable chair across from her desk, not behind it, "tell me what's been happening." So I did, and the conversation after the funeral, the suspicious will, the drive to the country road, and the abandonment. With each detail I shared, Maria's expression grew more serious and angry. "The document they showed you," she said when I finished, "was definitely not the will James and I prepared 9 months ago. What they presented to me was a complete fake." I thought it might be. I opened my purse and took out the metal box. From inside it, I pulled out the deed to my 8 acres. Maria examined the deed, nodding slowly. "Very smart. You and James always planned ahead. This property includes the main water source and the original greenhouse, essential for any development project." Maria set the deed carefully on her desk. "What do you want to do, Victoria?" I met her eyes directly. "I want my home back. I want the business my husband built, and I want my children to understand exactly what they've tried to do to me." Maria didn't look shocked at the hardness in my voice. She just nodded thoughtfully. "Let's start with getting you a safe place to stay tonight. My neighbor, Mrs. Kim, runs a bed and breakfast. Tomorrow we'll begin the legal process." "No, I shook my head firmly. I need to move faster than that. The development company is supposed to meet with them next Thursday. That's only 7 days away. Understanding flickered in Maria's eyes. You're not just planning to go through the courts slowly. Legal courts are for people who have months to wait, Maria. I have a better plan. That night in the cozy guest room at Kim's bed and breakfast, decorated with quilts and smelling like jasmine, I made my first phone call, not to my children. They could wonder where I was, whether I'd made it safely to town or collapsed beside the sheep pasture. My call was to Patricia Goldman, the president of First Community Bank, where Blackwell's organic farm had kept its accounts for 35 years. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm so sorry about James' passing. Thank you, Patricia. I'm calling because I've discovered some very troubling financial activity, and I need your help to protect what's left of our business. My second call was to Dr. Rodriguez, the county agriculture specialist who'd worked with us for years helping local farmers. Victoria, I saw you at the funeral, but didn't get a chance to talk. How are you holding up? I'm managing, Carlos, but I think there's something you should know about a development project that could damage the county's best farmland. My third call was to Rebecca Martinez, editor of the Riverside County Weekly, and my friend since our kids played together in elementary school. Vicky, I've been thinking about you since the service. Are you doing okay? I'm surviving, Becca. But I think there's a story you might find interesting about developers, fake legal documents, and what happens when children abandon their responsibilities. By midnight, I had made 10 calls, each one a thread in the web I was creating. Outside my window, the quiet streets of Riverside County were peaceful under the streetlights, unaware that Victoria Blackwell, who'd always been the peacekeeper, was preparing for battle. In the morning, I met Maria at her office with a notebook full of plans. I need you to freeze all business accounts, I told her, and I need you to file an emergency court order stopping any sale of the property based on that fake will. Maria reviewed my notes, her eyebrows rising higher with each page. This is very thorough. You know every contract, every supplier, every detail of the farm operation. I spent 40 years building this business with James. I know where every penny goes and every plant comes from. I lean forward in my chair and I'm going to use all of that knowledge. Your children won't give up quietly, Maria warned. I'm hoping they won't. By noon, all the pieces were moving. Maria had filed the emergency court order. Patricia had frozen the business accounts, pending investigation of suspicious activity. Carlos had contacted the Environmental Protection Office about wetlands on the proposed development site, wetlands that happened to be on my 8 acres of land. I sat in Maria's office watching the clock move toward 1 more morning when my children would discover that their perfectly planned scheme had hit its first major obstacle. My new phone rang right on schedule, the number they shouldn't have had, but Maria had made sure they received it. I let it ring 7 times before answering, my voice perfectly calm. This is Victoria. Mom! Catherine's voice was sharp with barely controlled panic. What have you done? I've simply protected what belongs to me. Where are you? David's voice cut in. They had me on speakerphone. We've been worried sick about you. The lies sat between us like a poisonous snake. They hadn't called the police to report a missing elderly woman, hadn't contacted friends to ask if I was safe. They'd been too busy trying to finalize their betrayal to worry about whether I'd survived their abandonment. Worried that I might interfere with your development deal, I asked, my voice steady and clear. That's not fair, Mom, Catherine whined. We made a mistake. We can work this out. You made a choice, I corrected her. Now I'm making mine. Listen carefully. No, I'm offering you one chance to walk away with your dignity. Admit the will was fake. Sign the business and house back to me legally. In return, I won't press criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. Catherine laughed, a harsh sound. You're bluffing. You have nothing. The will is perfectly legal. The will is a complete forgery, Maria interrupted, leaning toward the speakerphone. As the attorney who prepared James Blackwell's real will, I can testify that what you presented was fake. Silence stretched across the phone line like a held breath. "You have until tomorrow morning," I said calmly. After that, I contact the district attorney and the story goes to the newspapers. I hung up before they could respond. Maria leaned back in her chair, almost smiling. "You realize they'll probably refuse your offer." "I'm counting on it." I stood and gathered my purse. Now I need to visit the bank in person. The next 28 hours passed in a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and quiet conversations in offices throughout Riverside County. People who had known me for decades, known James and me together, stepped forward with support and information, not because they felt sorry for me, but because they were angry about what my children had tried to do, and perhaps because they enjoyed seeing the Blackwell kids who had always acted too good for small town life get what they deserved. By evening, I'd moved into a small apartment above Santos's Mexican restaurant. The owner, Maria's cousin, had offered it to me for as long as I needed it. "Stay as long as you want," he said, handing me the key. "Your children never appreciated what good people their parents were." I slept well that night, surprisingly well, surrounded by the smells of cumin and cilantro drifting up from the restaurant below. In the morning, I dressed in clothes Rebecca Martinez had lent me, a nice blouse and slacks that fit perfectly, and prepared for the next phase of my plan. At exactly 9 in the morning, when the courthouse opened, I filed paperwork asserting my legal ownership of the 8 acres that included the water rights and main greenhouse property that made any development impossible without my permission. At 10, I met with the County Environmental Board about the conservation restrictions James and I had quietly established years ago, restrictions that would prevent any commercial development, even if Catherine somehow got control of the other land. At 11, I sat with Rebecca in the newspaper office providing documentation for a front-page story titled "Local Organic Farm at Heart of Inheritance Fraud. Development Plans Threaten County Agriculture." By noon, my phone was ringing again. "The offer is off the table," I said immediately when I answered. "Mom, you're making a huge mistake." Catherine's voice had lost all pretense of sweetness. "The development company's lawyers are threatening to sue us if we can't deliver the property as promised. That sounds like your problem, not mine." "You don't understand," David broke in, his voice high with panic. "I used the advance money from the development deal to pay off debts. If this falls through, I could lose everything. You should have considered that before you left me on a country road like garbage." "But that was Catherine's idea," he protested. "I didn't know she was going to do that until we were already driving." The betrayal between my children gave me no satisfaction. None of this made me happy. It was simply necessary justice being served. "The bank records show you withdrew $22,000 4 days before your father's funeral, David," I said, keeping my voice clinical and cold. "You were both planning your fresh start before we even buried him." He started crying then, the same dramatic sobs I'd heard throughout his childhood when he didn't get his way. "It's too late for tears," I continued. "Maria will send you the legal papers. You both sign away any claims to Blackwell's organic farm and the house. In return, I don't press charges for fraud, elder abuse, and theft." "What about the $22,000? Catherine asked, her business mind still calculating angles. "That money's gone," I replied simply. "You get to avoid jail time. That's all you get now." I hung up and set the phone down, then looked out the window of Maria's office at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. Across the street, people were setting up for the weekly farmers market the same way they had every Saturday for decades. Normal people living honest lives where children didn't abandon their mothers on empty roads. "They'll fight this," Maria said, setting a cup of tea next to me. "Let them try." I didn't touch the tea. I have one more call to make. I dialed a number I'd memorized years ago but rarely used. "Hello, Robert. It's Victoria Blackwell. I think it's time I asked for that favor you owe James." Robert Kim had been James's business partner in their very first greenhouse 35 years ago, before he moved to Sacramento to start what became the largest organic distribution company in Northern California. When Robert's first business failed, James had loaned him money to start over, money that helped him build an empire now worth millions. Victoria, his voice was warm but surprised. I was planning to call you after I heard about James. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, Robert. I need your help with a situation involving my children and some developers who prey on grieving families. I explained everything. The fake will, the abandonment, the development company's plans. Robert listened without saying a word. When I finished, the silence went on so long I thought we'd been disconnected. I'll be in Riverside County tomorrow morning, he finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. These development companies, Golden State Properties, I know them. They've been destroying small communities up and down the West Coast. Victoria, what they tried to do to you fits a pattern we've been tracking. I've been looking for a way to stop them, and now you have one, I said simply. Yes, we do. Don't sign anything until I arrive. And Victoria, I'm sorry about your children. Some people just turn out wrong despite good parenting. I no longer have children, I replied quietly. I just have enemies now. That night, I sat in Maria's cousin's kitchen after the restaurant closed, drinking tea and helping him prepare vegetables for the next day's lunch specials. You should eat something, he said gently, pointing to the soup he'd made for me. You need strength for what's coming. I'm not hungry, I admitted. Food felt unnecessary, just fuel to keep going. Heard your daughter is staying at the expensive hotel outside town. He mentioned while chopping onions. Your son is still at your house. People are talking. Let them talk. The small town information network had always annoyed my children, but now it served me well. Every move they made I knew about within hours. Rebecca's article will be in tomorrow's paper, he continued. Got a call from a reporter in Los Angeles, too. They want to do a follow-up story about developers targeting elderly people. Something about Golden State Properties having problems with other projects. I nodded, not surprised. Robert's call had confirmed what I'd suspected. These developers had a pattern of targeting vulnerable property owners, especially older people dealing with family deaths. Have I been too harsh? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Not self-doubt, just genuine curiosity about whether my response fit the crime. Maria's cousin stopped chopping and looked at me seriously. You and James were good people, Mrs. Blackwell. Your children made their choice when they left you on that road. Now they have to live with the consequence. That seemed like enough of an answer. Morning brought Robert Kim, looking exactly like the successful businessman he'd become. Expensive suit, confident manner, but with the same kind eyes I remembered from 35 years ago. Victoria, he hugged me briefly, then got straight to business. We've filed legal challenges against Golden State Properties in 7 counties. Now we add yours to the list. For the next 5 hours, I watched a master strategist at work. Robert didn't just know business law. He used it like a precision tool, cutting away at the developers' plans piece by piece. By lunchtime, he had drafted documents that would not only stop the housing development project, but potentially shut down Golden State Properties entirely. Your children's signatures, he said, sliding papers across Maria's desk. We need them to officially withdraw their fraudulent claims. Otherwise, this drags on for months in court. Maria tells me they're still refusing to cooperate. They'll sign, I said with complete certainty. They just need the right motivation. I pulled out my phone and called District Attorney Williams, whom I'd known since she was a little girl taking dance lessons at the community center. Janet, it's Victoria Blackwell. I'd like to discuss filing criminal charges against my children. Robert raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as I made an appointment for later that afternoon. When I hung up, he nodded with something like admiration. You always were tougher than James led on. James knew exactly how tough I was, I corrected. He just never thought I'd need to use it against our own family. Just after 5 deuced, my phone rang again. Catherine's voice clipped and formal. We'll sign your papers, but we want something in writing saying you won't pursue criminal charges. I already offered that yesterday, I reminded her. The terms have changed since then. What do you want now? She sounded defeated, which gave me no pleasure at all. Meet me at Maria's office at 7. Bring David. I'll explain my final terms. When they arrived, I was ready for them, sitting between Robert and Maria like a wall of legal protection. My children looked awful. Catherine's usually perfect hair was messy, her expensive clothes wrinkled. David's eyes were red from crying, his hands shaking slightly. Neither one could look directly at me. Sit down, I said, pointing to the chairs across from us. This won't take long. Robert slid the documents across the table with professional efficiency. Mrs. Blackwell has agreed not to pursue criminal charges for forgery, fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit theft, crimes that carry sentences of up to 15 years in prison. In exchange, you will both sign these papers admitting the will was fake and giving up all claims to Blackwell's organic farm, the house, and any related property worth approximately $4.8 million. Catherine read through the document quickly, her face getting paler with each page. This says we lose our inheritance completely. That's correct, I said simply, but that's exactly what you tried to do to me, only you added abandonment on a country road. But Mom, David started to say. Stop talking, I held up my hand. This isn't a discussion. Here, sign or I walk across the street to the district attorney's office and file charges. Janet Williams is waiting for my decision. At the mention of the DA, both my children's faces went white. They both remembered Janet from high school, another small-town kid they'd looked down on who had grown up to become more successful than either of them. You'd really do it? Send us to prison? There was genuine shock in Catherine's voice, as if the mother who had kissed their scraped knees and made their favorite birthday cakes couldn't possibly be this cold and unforgiving. The mother who would have forgiven you anything died on Willow Creek Road, I replied evenly. You left her there to figure out how to survive. Catherine looked away first, then reached for the pen Maria offered. Her signature was shaky but legal. David took much longer, tears falling onto the paper as he signed his name. What happens now? He asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Now you leave Riverside County, I said, gathering the signed documents. Both of you, today. If I see either of you in this town again, I will file charges regardless of these papers. But the development company, Catherine asked weakly, what about our contract with them? Robert smiled coldly. Golden State Properties will be notified that the land was never legally for sale. They'll also be receiving notice of our lawsuit for their part in attempting to defraud a widow. My children left without another word, walking separately to their cars in the parking lot behind Maria's office. I watched it through the window as Catherine got into her fancy car and David climbed into his expensive rental. Neither looked back at the building where they had just signed away their future. Neither looked at each other. It's done, Maria said quietly, placing the documents in her safe. But it wasn't done. Not completely. The legal battle was won, but my personal war had one final act. I need a ride home, I told Robert. Of course, he said. Where to? Blackwell's organic farm looked exactly the same as it had a week ago. Same greenhouse gleaming in the afternoon sun, same hand-painted sign James had made, same gravel parking area where customers had pulled up for decades. Only David's rental car sitting near the main building showed that anything had changed. Want me to come in with you? Robert asked as he parked beside the car. This last part I need to do by myself. The greenhouse was unlocked and I could hear movement among the plant tables. David, I called out, my voice echoing in the humid green space that had been the heart of our family business. He appeared from behind a display of winter vegetables, his face streaked with tears and protégé rascasse at l'étagenie. He appeared from behind a display of winter vegetables, his face streaked with tears and dirt. Looking for something? I asked coldly. He didn't seem surprised to see me. Didn't try to explain himself. I thought there might be something here, some cash Mom kept hidden. Your mother never hid money in the greenhouse. Everything she had, she shared openly with her family. Something you never learned to appreciate. Now, David did look at me, his face a mixture of desperation and shame. You've ruined everything, Mom. The development deal is completely dead. Catherine's creditors are already calling her. My real estate investors are demanding their money back. Actions have consequences, I said simply. Is that what this is? Some kind of lesson? He laughed bitterly. Always the teacher, aren't you? Not a lesson, I corrected. Justice. I walked over to the old potting bench where James used to start seedlings and pulled out a weathered wooden box from underneath. From inside, I took out a sealed envelope with David's name on it in James's careful handwriting. Your father wrote this for you the week before he died. I was going to give it to you after the funeral, before I understood what you really were. David reached for it desperately, but I held it back. Did you even love him? Or were you just waiting for him to die so you could cash in? Something flickered across his face. Maybe real grief, maybe just embarrassment at being caught. I did love Dad, he whispered. You loved his money, I corrected sharply. The safety net he provided, the investments he made in your failing ventures. What was it this time, David? Bad gambling debts? Another startup that crashed? His silence told me everything I needed to know. Your father built something that could have supported generations of our family if you'd cared enough to learn how it worked. I placed the envelope on the potting bench between us. Instead, you tried to sell it for quick cash to pay off your mistakes. The organic farm is old-fashioned, he said weakly. Dad couldn't see that things were changing. People want convenience, not handcrafted vegetables. So you decided to turn his life's work into a housing development? I finished while destroying everything he valued, everything this community needed. You could have had a secure future, learned the business, carried on his legacy. No pressure except the pressure of honest work. David shook his head like I was the unreasonable one. Even now he couldn't understand what he'd thrown away. Take your father's letter and go, I said firmly. Read it or burn it, but either way, this is the last time you'll set foot in this greenhouse. He grabbed the envelope and pushed past me without another word. I listened to his footsteps on the gravel outside, the slam of his car door, the engine starting up and driving away. Only when the sound had completely faded did I allow myself to sit down on James's old work stool, surrounded by the plants he'd loved and the dreams we'd shared. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since that moment on Willow Creek Road, when I realized my children had become strangers to me. Instead, I began organizing the greenhouse tools, following the routine James and I had shared for decades. As evening fell, I made my way to the house and sat on the front porch in the rocking chair where James used to rest after long days in the greenhouse. Above me, stars appeared in the clear winter sky. Around me, the organic farm stretched peacefully into the darkness. The vegetables and flowers we'd nurtured together now preserved and thriving. My phone buzzed with a text message from Robert, letting me know the legal paperwork was filed and everything was secure. I'm home, I texted back, and I'm staying. 4 months later, I sat in the same rocking chair, watching the spring sunset paint the sky orange and pink above an organic farm, busier than it had been in years. The seasonal orders for fresh vegetables would be excellent this year, perhaps the best we'd ever had. I wouldn't be handling it alone. The new farm manager I'd hired, Carlos's son Miguel, had already proven himself more capable than my own children had ever been. My phone chimed with a text from Rebecca. Front page again. Thought you want to see this. The attached photo showed the Los Angeles Times business section, Golden State Properties CEO arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. The smaller headline mentioned Blackwell's organic farm as the case that had triggered the investigation, revealing a pattern of elder exploitation across the entire West Coast. I set the phone aside, feeling only quiet satisfaction. Justice served, though it had taken longer than I'd hoped. Another text arrived from an unknown number. Mom, please, it's been 4 months. Can we please talk? I deleted it without reading it completely, just like I deleted the others. David had been reaching out since the scandal broke, since his creditors took his car. his apartment, everything he'd bought with borrowed money, expecting the farm windfall. Catherine had stopped contacting me entirely, though Maria heard she'd moved back to Phoenix after losing her wellness spa to debt collectors. My children were learning the hardest lesson of their lives, that some mistakes can't be undone, some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned completely. As darkness settled over the organic farm, I rocked gently in James's chair, listening to the evening sounds of crickets and night birds, the gentle hum of the greenhouse heaters. In my lap was a notebook where I'd been sketching plans for Blackwell's Organic Farm's future, a gardening program for the local elementary school, expanded cooking classes using our vegetables, maybe even a small farm stand where people could learn about organic growing and sustainable living. James would have loved these ideas. We'd talked about similar dreams before his illness took over our conversations with treatments and hospital visits. "I'm doing it, James," I whispered to the quiet night air. "Everything we planned, everything they tried to destroy, it's all growing again." Tomorrow I would meet with the county extension office about starting the scholarship program, the James Blackwell Memorial Fund for young people studying sustainable agriculture, funded by the profits my children had tried to steal. Next week, I would host the first community garden workshop, teaching families how to grow their own organic vegetables and preserve their harvests. And in the peaceful evenings, I would sit here in James's chair, watching over the organic farm we had built together, the legacy that would continue and flourish without our children, not abandoned after all, but free. Free to nurture what mattered, free to help others learn and grow, free to honor my husband's memory in the way he would have wanted. That's my story. Some of you might think I was too harsh, too unforgiving. Some might say it's cruel to cut off your own family so completely. But remember what I told you at the start. Betrayal from people you've loved and trusted changes you in ways you can't undo. It burns away illusions and leaves something clearer and stronger in their place. My children made their choice on Willow Creek Road when they left me like discarded trash. I made my choice every day afterward.